China has identified the cause of the mysterious new virus.
Coronavirus.
There are fears a rapidly spreading virus has reached Australia.
This is a rapidly emerging situation.
Where there are cases, the government can quickly implement targeted measures and focus control efforts where they're needed most.
Together in collaboration with the pharmaceutical companies.
We need vaccines to immunize ourselves.
And then the final solution, which is a year to 2 years off, is the vaccine.
The answer to that is to really close things down.
Hello again, and welcome back to The Abstract. I am your host, Peter Kirby, author of the book Chemtrails Exposed, a New Manhattan Project, and staff writer at Activist Post. This week, we're going to be looking at the biological impacts of chemtrails, and we have found that chemtrails equal death. From the last two installments of The Abstract, we have learned that we are being sprayed with coal fly ash. So the question becomes, what does coal fly ash do to us and the environment? And from the title of this week's episode, I think you know what it does. For the full story of chemtrails and geoengineering, please buy and read my book, Chemtrails Exposed, a New Manhattan Project. Let us begin. There is already a huge body of scientific evidence showing what coal fly ash does to the environment. Coal-fired power plants have been spewing it out into the atmosphere for over 100 years now. So here in America and in North America, there's already been extensive environmental studies done. And to this day, there are environmental studies being conducted because in lots of other places around the world, such as in China, they do not intercept the coal fly ash coming out of the coal-fired power plant. And this is why they have such terrible pollution over there. And these studies have found that coal fly ash causes lung cancer, neurodegenerative diseases, chronic inflammation, respiratory disease, and cardiovascular disease. Reviewing this abundance of literature, Dr. Marvin Herndon, Ph.D. once again, and Dr. Mark Whiteside, M.D., the sitting director of Monroe County, Florida's Department of Health, have published a series of peer-reviewed published journal articles. In these articles, they have put the readily available information regarding to the biological impacts of coal fly ash, and they've put it into the context of us being sprayed from aircraft with this stuff. But before we start with their information, let's just look at particulate matter. Hey, believe it or not, it's bad for you to breathe in particulate matter. This is not a matter of debate. Have you ever breathed in like a dust cloud and, coughed like, there's like stuff in the air? Yeah, that's particulate matter. It's bad for you. That's common sense, but there have also been a whole lot of studies done on the exposure to particulate matter, particularly the inhalation of particulate matter. It has been found that the inhalation of particulate matter in general causes Alzheimer's disease, risk for stroke, risk for cardiovascular disease, lung inflammation and diabetes, reduced renal function, kidney function in older males, morbidity and premature mortality, decreased male fertility, low birth weight, onset of asthma, and increased hospital admissions. Then, when you're talking about coal fly ash, it's much worse, because coal fly ash is extremely toxic. Let's quote Drs. Herndon and Whiteside here. Quote, CFA, coal fly ash, contains a variety of potentially carcinogenic substances, including aluminosilicates, an iron oxide containing magnetic fraction, several toxic trace elements, nanoparticles, and alpha particle emitting radionuclides. Silica, arsenic, cadmium, and hexavalent chromium are found in CFA, coal fly ash, and all have been associated with increased lung cancer risk, unquote. As far as the neurological diseases are concerned, Centers for Disease Control data, CDC data, has confirmed a recent concurrent rise in neurological diseases, in Alzheimer's as well as Parkinson's disease. In 2019, Drs. Herndon and Whiteside published a paper titled Role of Aerosolized Coal Fly Ash in the Global Plankton Imbalance, Case of Florida's Toxic Algae Crisis. And, as one may guess from the title, the spraying of coal fly ash is causing toxic algae blooms. And these harmful blooms, in turn, have more harmful effects on the environment. You go a little further up the food chain, you find insects. Drs. Herndon and Whiteside published a 2018 peer-reviewed journal article titled Previously Unacknowledged Potential Factors in Catastrophic Bee and Insect Die-Off Arising from Coal Fly Ash Geoengineering. And they found that spraying coal fly ash into the atmosphere has a multitude of harmful observed effect upon insects. We can stop wondering why bee populations are down. There's also been a drop in global insect populations, a precipitous drop. Coal fly ash is full of stuff that's toxic to insects, such as silicon, aluminum, and iron, as well as arsenic, mercury, and cadmium. In fact, these three, arsenic, mercury, and cadmium, are used as insecticides. Not only that, but Drs. Herndon and Whiteside found that the chlorine and other certain constituents of aerosolized coal fly ash potentially destroy atmospheric ozone, and this exposes insects to lethal levels of UVB and UVC solar radiation. And as we know, birds eat insects, so when there's a lack of insects, you see a drop in bird populations. In 2018, Drs. Herndon and Whiteside published a peer-reviewed journal article titled Aerosolized Coal Fly Ash, a previously unrecognized primary factor in the catastrophic global demise of bird populations and species. Not only are birds being denied their food, Drs. Herndon and Whiteside have found that there are multiple metals and elements well known in coal fly ash to adversely affect all portions of the avian life cycle. Drs. Herndon and Whiteside have also looked at bat populations. In 2020, they published a peer-reviewed journal article that is titled Unacknowledged Potential Factors in Catastrophic Bat Die-Off Arising from Coal Fly Ash Geoengineering. And in this paper, they found that bat populations worldwide are suffering a precipitous decline. They found that samples of bat tissue as well as bat guano consistently show an origin in coal fly ash. Drs. Herndon and Whiteside have published a series of peer-reviewed journal articles about the harmful effects of coal fly ash spraying upon plants. Drs. Herndon and Whiteside in these papers have found a global die-off of vegetation, and the coal fly ash is harmful to trees. In particular, this is because the plants and the trees are subject to increased UV radiation, desiccation, and toxicity. Once the trees are weakened by this trifecta, they are then susceptible to insect infestations, fungal infections, and other biotic factors such as bacteria and viruses. I published a whole article on how chemtrails are the root cause of these tremendous forest fires we've been seeing recently, most notably in California. These trees are dried out, they're toxic, and they're just tinder for these giant fires. You got flames going like 200 feet into the air, and people are like, well, gee, I've never seen this before. I wonder what's going on. And someone says, oh, this must be global warming. And they say, oh, yeah, right. How is a little fluctuation in the Earth's global temperature going to cause trees to suddenly go up like matchsticks? I'd like to see an answer about that from these global warming environmentalists. And further, as Drs. Herndon and Whiteside write, I think it was Dr. Herndon who wrote this actually, in the summary of his book, their book, Chemtrails Are Not Contrails, The Face of Evil, the summary that's available on Amazon. They write about how, haven't you noticed how plants and birds, and there's just like a lack of all these things? I mean, the trees and plants just don't grow like they used to. There used to be tremendous growth everywhere, especially here where I live in Marin County and in San Francisco, and where I was raised in Brisbane, bordering San Francisco by land to the south. And I used to be amazed at the growth of plants around here. I was always impressed with the growth of plants up here in Marin County, particularly. I used to come up here periodically when I was a young man. And, I mean, the growth of things it was incredible. You just turn around and then, a couple days after you noticed it earlier, you'd see some bush or, some weeds that had just grown to incredible proportions. You don't even see that anymore. And Dr. Herndon also notes that try turning over a rock. I remember as a kid, you used to turn over a rock and there'd just be this multitude of insects who would just be thriving with life, and they'd just scatter everywhere, and it was kind of fun as a kid, to see what was going on under there. Try turning over a rock these days, and maybe a couple things going on, not much. But for the full story that Drs. Herndon and Whiteside are bringing you, this incredibly important information, please go and buy their book, Chemtrails Are Not Contrails, The Face of Evil. Read it, understand it, and do something, please, about what's going on here. It's available on Amazon. Now, the guy with the hedge trimmer is getting closer to my window here, so it's getting a little louder. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to spend some time here on silver iodide. Okay, because with my interview with Renette Senum, as well as the bills that are making their way through state legislatures in the East, there appears to be an emphasis upon the conventional cloud seeding industry. They're like, hey, hold on a second. What's going on here? I mean, there's this chemtrails thing apparently that these nutty conspiracy theorists are talking about, but I mean, you got this overt program that's been known and above board and on the books and everything since just after World War II, since 1947 was when this conventional cloud seeding industry took off, and they've been spraying us with silver iodide ever since. It was the famous trio of General Electric scientists who in 1947 began the conventional weather modification industry, and they began it with dry ice, not silver iodide. The big press explosion that was made when they first did this was all about dry ice. They had dumped dry ice into a plane and made it into a cloud and made it rain. And then there was this big press explosion. Oh, look, they dumped dry ice. They made it rain. Isn't it cool? And of course, dry ice is innocuous. In fact, it is carbon dioxide, and it is innocuous in the environment. So, that was fine. They dumped some dry ice into a cloud and made it rain. There's no problem there. Of course, a month later, they were dumping silver iodide and other things. I think they dumped lead iodide into clouds as well. They started experimenting with all these toxic substances a month later, and then the press didn't cover it. The story had blown over by then. And then all these state legislatures, they write all these bills where they say it's fine, go ahead, just dump silver iodide anywhere you go. It's just no problem. And guess what? Silver iodide is toxic. If you simply look up silver iodide material safety data sheets, or MSDS, online, you'll find that silver iodide is an irritant to the skin, as well as irritant to the eye, and hazardous in case of ingestion or inhalation. You will also find that multiple material safety data sheets available online will tell you that toxicology information for silver iodide is often not available. They've been spraying us with this stuff since 1947, and the toxicology information is not available. Equally as unbelievable, To date, there have been no publicly available long-term studies of silver iodide's ecological impacts. It is widely suggested that silver iodide exposure causes argyria, I think that's how you pronounce it, Argyria, argyria, which is characterized by a blue-gray discoloration of the eyes, skin, mucous membranes, and internal organs. Does that sound healthy to you? I found a particular material safety data sheet produced by Fisher Scientific, which reads that chronic ingestion of iodides during pregnancy has resulted in fetal death, severe goiter, and cretinoid appearance of the newborn. I guess this is all okay with the Weather Modification Association that says that, silver iodide is fine. There's no need for studying any of this. But then, of course, if you're familiar with my work, I've gone back and I've looked at the historical weather modification literature, and it was incredibly difficult to find any good information here. These reports themselves acknowledge this fact. There was a 1966 National Science Foundation report that said, quote, "The present state of knowledge places uncomfortable limits on the prediction of the biological consequences of modifying the weather," unquote. There was a 1969 Bureau of Reclamation report noting, quote, "There has so far not been a single biological field study completed." There was also a 1972 study from the Council on Environmental Quality, which stated, quote, "Projects may have significant adverse environmental effects." All this while a 1972 study conducted by the Council on Environmental Quality stated, quote, "Projects may have significant adverse environmental effects." But the conventional weather modifiers don't care. They've exhibited a pattern of dismissing the potentially harmful effects. In 1967, weather modifier Archie Kahan did something that most conventional weather modification industry people do. He conflated the biological impacts of silver iodide with its efficacy as a nucleant. This is a common tactic used to avoid answering the most obvious question. What they've been doing is saying, oh, well, the biological impacts are you're going to get more rain over in this area and less rain in that area if you do weather modification. And so, there'll be more growth and more birds and insects where they get more rain. And that's not what we're talking about here. I mean, the most obvious question is, okay, you're spraying a toxic substance out of an aircraft. What does that do? I mean, if it's toxic, you pretty much know it's killing the environment. But that's the most obvious question. They just do a little dance around it. I mean, they do this just endlessly in the historical weather modification literature. They just do their little dance and then say, oh, there are probably no adverse effects. No further study is needed. Don't worry about it. Now, if you dig really, really deeply, such as I have, you will find reputable reports stating that silver iodide is toxic to the environment and it kills animals, plants, and animals. There was a 1969 Bureau of Reclamation report that noted silver iodide is exceptionally bad for organisms further down the food chain. Let's quote from this 1969 Bureau of Reclamation report. Quote, "Silver compounds are much more toxic to fish than terrestrial vertebrates. Some of the higher concentrations of silver recorded in precipitation from seeded storms are comparable to the lowest concentrations lethal to fish in the short run." This 1969 report also found silver to be, quote, "highly toxic to microorganisms," unquote. The report continues, quote, "Many investigators have placed Ag, silver, at or near the top of the list among heavy metals in toxicity to fungi, slime molds, and bacteria." Folks, Things like fungi, I think that's how you say it, slime molds, and bacteria are vital links in the food chain, okay? You can't just get rid of that stuff and figure that the rest of the environment is going to be fine. It's very bad when these things are killed. The bottom line is that there is compelling evidence showing that silver iodide has seriously negative biological impacts. We cannot know for sure that spraying this stuff is safe if no reputable public long-term studies have been done. But they have been going ahead and doing it anyway, just like today's geoengineers.